Before we get into it, one thing needs correcting. A version of this story has circulated online, describing it as a love triangle involving a best friend's baby's father. That framing doesn't hold up. According to every court document, police statement, and piece of trial testimony on record, Wilanna Bibbs and Justin Wright were in a direct romantic relationship, her boyfriend, not a friend's partner. It's a small distinction with a big consequence. It changes who was actually in danger, and it changes what warning signs actually existed. So let's tell it the way it actually happened. On the morning of May 9th, 2021, Mother's Day, Cassandra Bibbs woke up in Durham, North Carolina, to a text from her 20-year-old daughter. "Hey Mom, happy Mother's Day. I love you and appreciate you for everything you do. Call me." It's the kind of message every mother wants to wake up to. Cassandra tried to call back. No answer. She figured her daughter was busy. Wilanna was 1,100 miles away, visiting Davenport, Iowa, with her boyfriend, a man her family had never fully trusted. Cassandra went to work. She kept her phone close, the way you do on Mother's Day when you're waiting for your kid to pick up. Later that day, she looked down and saw them. 4 missed calls, back to back to back to back, all from Wilanna. By the time Cassandra saw those calls, her daughter had already been dead for hours. Before this becomes a story about a crime, it needs to be a story about a person. Wilanna Simone Bibbs grew up in Durham, North Carolina. Her mother would later describe her as a girl who could sing like an angel, a talented vocalist who was also a skilled makeup artist, the kind of multi-hyphenate creative that Southern R&B and gospel scenes tend to produce in bulk but rarely let break through. She had a plan: move to Atlanta, the music industry gravity well of the South, and put herself in the room with people who could actually make a career happen. That plan worked, in the sense that it put her in a room with someone who could change her career. It's the reason she ended up dead in Iowa 2 years later. In Atlanta, Wilanna met Justin Wright. Justin Lamont Wright wasn't some random guy chasing a girl half his age around the club. He was, by the entertainment industry's own metrics, a legitimate success story. Wright told an interviewer in 2019 that his father was a DJ who introduced him to music before he could read. By 5, he was hooked. By 8, he'd written his first song and performed it at his own father's funeral. By 13, he was self-releasing music online, and that music reportedly caught the attention of R. Kelly, who brought him into his orbit as a mentor. By 16, Wright had his first platinum writing credit and was touring as an artist alongside Chris Brown, Bow Wow, Soulja Boy, and Lil Wayne. At 21, he founded his own company, Camp Entertainment Worldwide. By his early 30s, industry write-ups credited him with production and songwriting work connected to Timbaland, Rick Ross, and DJ Khaled. On paper, multi-platinum songwriter wasn't a stretch. It was his actual bio. That's the resume Wilanna Bibbs was standing across from when they started dating in Atlanta, a few months before she died. To an aspiring 20-year-old singer, a man like that isn't just a boyfriend. He's a door. Doors like that don't always open the way you think they will. Here's the part of the story most people skip past, because it sounds like a throwaway detail, until you realize it's the reason 2 people who had no business being in Davenport, Iowa, ended up there at all. Justin Wright had ties to the Quad Cities region. According to Wilanna's mother, the couple traveled to Davenport for a birthday party. Not a romantic getaway, not a business trip, just a party involving people connected to Wright. 2 people, a long way from home. Wilanna, a Durham girl who'd built her whole world in Atlanta. Wright, an Atlanta-based industry figure with family roots in a quiet Mississippi River city most people can't find on a map. Whatever pulled them there, it put Wilanna Bibbs in an unfamiliar city, surrounded by people who weren't hers, on the last day of her life. This is where the timeline gets specific enough to hurt. At 1:05 p.m. on May 9th, Wilanna called her best friend, Kylan Adams. Adams would later testify that Bibbs was crying and screaming on the phone. It sounded like she was breathing hard, like she was running. Adams said she could hear the sound of vehicles in the background. The call lasted about a minute. Then it happened again. A second call, a third call, at 1:17 p.m., a fourth and final call at 1:27 p.m. 4 calls in 22 minutes, each one brief. Each one, according to the friend who took them, sounding worse than the last. At 1:25 p.m., Davenport police were dispatched to a home in the 1500 block of Calvin Street for a disturbance call. When officers and Davenport fire and medic personnel arrived, they found Wilanna Bibbs. She was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 20 years old. Justin Wright didn't run. He didn't disappear into the wind the way TV crime dramas train us to expect. He was arrested and, within days, charged with first-degree murder, held without bond. At his first court appearance, when a judge asked whether he could afford his own attorney, Wright said he couldn't. He told the court he wasn't making anything right now, that all of his belongings had been stolen back in November, and that he'd been sleeping in hotels. It's a strange, almost mundane detail to surface in the middle of a murder case. A multi-platinum songwriter, a man who'd toured with some of the biggest names in hip-hop and R&B, standing in an Iowa courtroom asking for a public defender because he couldn't pay for his own. Whatever was happening in Justin Wright's life in the months before May 9, 2021, it wasn't the success story his bio suggested. Here's something true crime content rarely slows down for, because it doesn't make for a dramatic scene. The waiting. Wilanna Bibbs was killed in May 2021. Justin Wright's trial didn't begin until nearly 2 years later, in April 2023. For 2 years, Cassandra Bibbs and the rest of Wilanna's family lived in the space between an arrest and an answer, attending hearings, waiting on a court calendar, watching a case slowly grind through Scott County's judicial system, while their daughter's death became, to the wider world, a passing headline about a music industry name that gossip blogs recycled every few months. That gap is its own kind of cruelty. It's the part of these stories nobody puts in the thumbnail. When the trial finally began, it ran 10 days, long, by the standards of most homicide cases. Prosecutors laid out the timeline, the relationship that started in Atlanta, the trip to Davenport, and the 4 phone calls that placed Wilanna Bibbs, terrified and running, in the final half hour of her life. Kaylin Adams took the stand. "She was my best friend," Adams told the jury. Bibbs, she said, was like a sister to her. Adams walked the jury through those 4 calls, minute by minute. The crying, the screaming, the sound of vehicles, the silence after. The jury also heard from investigators about the arrest affidavit, which stated that Wright had acted deliberately and with premeditation. After 10 days of testimony, the jury didn't need long. They deliberated for about 90 minutes before returning a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Under Iowa law, a first-degree murder conviction carries a mandatory sentence. The judge has no discretion, no room to weigh mitigating factors. It's life in prison, full stop. At sentencing, Wilanna's family got the chance to speak directly to the man who killed her. Her father, Thomas Bibbs, didn't mince words. He told the court that Wright had killed his daughter over $70 and called him the clown he'd warned her about. Read that again. A father who saw this coming. A father who tried to tell his daughter that the man she was building a music career around wasn't who he presented himself to be. And a daughter who, like so many people in relationships with warning signs attached, didn't leave in time, or didn't feel like she could. Other family members spoke too. Some said they couldn't forgive Wright, but that maybe God could. Some said they hoped he'd find a way to become a better person, someday, somehow, from behind bars. Wright chose not to speak. As he was led out of the courtroom to begin a life sentence, his own mother stood and asked if she could say goodbye to her son. 2 families, both permanently altered by 22 minutes on a Sunday afternoon in Iowa. In the aftermath, Wilanna's mother didn't disappear into private grief. She turned her daughter's death into a warning for other women. Cassandra has spoken publicly about domestic violence, urging people to believe survivors and pointing to a hard statistic advocates cite often. It takes the average person in an abusive relationship 7 to 9 attempts before they successfully leave for good. Not one attempt, not two, 7 to 9. That number matters here, because it reframes the entire case. This wasn't a stranger danger story, or a random act of violence between two people who barely knew each other. Multiple accounts, including comments from people close to Bibbs in the days after her death, described a relationship with a pattern behind it: control, isolation from people who cared about her, a slow erosion of the support system that might have gotten her out sooner. None of that is unusual in domestic violence cases. What's unusual is that this time, the relationship had a public bio, a discography, and a name people recognized. Strip away the platinum plaques and the industry connections, and this is one of the most common stories in America. A young woman in a new relationship, far from home, with a family that saw red flags she couldn't, or wouldn't, see herself. What made this one different is visibility. Justin Wright's public profile meant this case got covered by entertainment outlets as well as local news, which meant more eyes on a story that, for thousands of other women each year, never makes it past a local police blotter. Wilanna Bibbs wanted to sing. She moved states away from her family to chase that.